Open the podcast bay door as hell.
Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 86 of Welcome to Geektown. I'm your host, Kurt Onstead. I've been a proud geek all my life, being into role-playing games, board games, sci-fi, fantasy, and especially superheroes and comics. And I want to help others join me in those pursuits, but I've found that sometimes people can get overwhelmed or feel left out because they don't already have what some consider the requisite knowledge to be considered a fan, and that's where Welcome to Geektown comes in. Here you can ask your questions without feeling like a gatekeeper is calling you out for not yet being fully versed in every aspect of your new interest. We're nearing the end of the month, so it's time for me to shout out my patrons. I have a new patron to thank. Denise Bennick joined up, and so thanks goes out to her as well as my other current patrons. Jesse Clark, Ricky Garvin, Rob Garrison, Forrest Woodward, Aaron Borst, Carla Hoffman, Lyndon Onstead, Julio Herrera, Matthew Saint, and Utuk Zul. Remember, it's just $1 per month to join in and get this monthly shoutout, as well as full scripts and audio outtakes. Now, on to the show. I have 2 questions with somewhat shorter answers this time. Let's start with a question I got from Jenny the Geek, who is a YouTube creator you can check out. She's done a few interesting videos and has more in the works. Just search Jenny the Geek with no spaces on YouTube to find her channel. She sent me a question through the Welcome to Geektown website. It says, I've started reading Claremont X-Men and I've noticed that Black Tom and Banshee cancel each other's powers out, as well as Cyclops and Havoc canceling each other's powers out too. Does this happen with other mutant families, and why does it happen? Well, Jenny, you've actually hit on basically all the big examples of this, let's call it, relative immunity. In the mutant subset of the Marvel Universe, there are lots of siblings, cousins, and parent-child relationships. Colossus and Magic, Professor X and Legion, Magneto and Polaris are just a few examples, in addition to the 2 pairs you brought up in your question. But unlike Scott and Alex, or Tom and Sean, that's Cyclops, Havoc, Black Tom, and Banshee, respectively, these other family members aren't immune to each other's powers. In some cases, a child will have similar powers to one of their parents. Banshee's daughter Siren has a sonic scream just like her father, and Polaris inherited Magneto's control over the magnetic force. But they can use their powers against each other, and have on multiple occasions. Then there are twins like Aurora and Northstar, or Andreas and Andrea von Strucker, also known as the Fenris twins, who actually gain additional powers when they're in close contact. Getting back to Cyclops and Havoc, thanks to the X-Men cartoons, non-comic readers may be familiar with these siblings and their immunity. But they have other family members that have not been portrayed in other media yet. In the 90s, it was hinted that there was a third Summers brother, but this wasn't confirmed for over a decade. Chris Claremont left the title before he revealed who this third sibling was, although a few hints intimated that Gambit may have been his choice. Other writers picked up this dangling plot thread and introduced new characters intended to fill this role. First, Fabian Nicieza debuted Adam X, also known as Adam the Extreme. It was the 90s after all. Fabian, along with penciler Jeff Johnson, introduced the character in 1993, but he left the X books in 1995 before he could definitively establish the familial relationship. He stated in interviews that Adam was intended to be the third Summers brother, but we didn't get an in-universe confirmation of this until earlier this month. In a title called X-Men Legends, past X-title writers are given small arcs to tell missing tales from their era of continuity. The first arc was by Fabian, with art by Brett Booth, and finally filled in Adam's backstory. Adam was revealed as the half-brother of the Summers boys, being the genetically engineered son of the Shi'ar Emperor D'Ken and Catherine Summers, Scott and Alex's mother. The X-Men often get involved in space adventures and have many connections to the Shi'ar Empire at this point, and another connection was added in 2006 when Ed Brubaker and Trevor Hairsine introduced Cyclops and Havoc's full brother, Gabriel Summers, who uses the codename Vulcan. In the Deadly Genesis miniseries, a lot of history is revealed, retconning some important stories in the X-Men canon. In this story, we learn that Scott and Alex's mother, Catherine, had been pregnant when she and her husband, Christopher, were abducted by the Shi'ar. When Christopher tried to escape, the Emperor D'Ken killed Catherine as a punishment. However, the unborn child, unknown to Mr. Summers, was saved and placed in an incubation accelerator, which aged the child quickly up to his teenage years. He was made a slave and stationed with his master, Eric the Red, on Earth. He was able to eventually escape and found his way to Moira McTaggart, frequent X-Men ally, who took him in and helped him learn to use his budding powers. Sometime later, after the original X-Men team was defeated by Krakoa, Professor X recruited a new team to rescue them. However, this retconned-in second team also failed, necessitating the founding of a third team, this one being the International Team of Mutants introduced in Giant Size X-Men #1, the book that renewed the X-Men concept and started Chris Claremont's epic run on the title. That second team included Cyclops' up to this point unknown brother, Vulcan. However, when that team was defeated, Professor X decided to mind-wipe Scott's memory of the incident and his now lost sibling. However, Vulcan actually survived, albeit comatose, when Krakoa was launched into space by Polaris. He eventually reawakened and returned to Earth, where he revealed Professor X's mind-wipe. Getting back to the thrust of Jenny's question, the Summers family now has 4 superpowered siblings, and while Scott, Alex, and Adam are all immune to each other's powers, Gabriel is the exception among the 4. He's able to absorb and manipulate energy on a vast scale, and that includes Cyclops' optic blasts and Havoc's blasts of cosmic energy as well, although in X-Men Kingbreaker #4, during a time when Alex had been powered above his normal levels, Vulcan was unable to deal with Alex's blast. So, why are some of these characters immune while others aren't? Well, the obvious answer is that the writers wanted it that way. But as for in-universe, there hasn't been a full explanation. But the most common theory follows a certain train of logic. First, a character like Cyclops has to be immune to his own powers. If he wasn't, every time he shot his eye beams out, he would go flying in the opposite direction, get whiplash, or even break his neck as the force exerted followed Newton's third law. Since this doesn't happen, we can say that he's immune. Now, while Cyclops and Havoc's powers aren't exactly the same, it appears that they use the same type of basic energy, and thus that self-immunity extends to their siblings' powers. Adam's power appears very different, as he's able to ignite any blood exposed to air, but according to this theory, the energy he uses to activate his powers would be from the same basic source as Alex and Scott. Vulcan, on the other hand, is an energy manipulator rather than an energy or force creator, and so he doesn't have access to the same source that grants whatever immunity that the others have. And when he returns the energy he absorbs, it's been changed enough that it no longer resembles the energy that Alex and Scott create, and so they're not immune to Vulcan's powers. On a similar note, Black Tom and Banshee's powers, while very different on the surface, are closely related enough that each is very resistant, although not completely immune, to the other. And energy creation seems to be the commonality for all of these characters. Other familial pairs, like the ones I mentioned up top, or Cable and Jean Grey, or Husk and Cannibal, like I said, there's a lot, don't consist of two people who create a visible energy from apparently nowhere. Instead, they have mental powers, or some alteration to their body that affects them personally, but doesn't extend out beyond themselves. In these cases, there's no self-immunity to confer, and so there's no way for them to be immune to the other family member. Now, this isn't a canon explanation, but based on the evidence we've seen, it's the best theory that various fans have come up with. If you have your own theory as to why this happens for a few mutants, but not others, feel free to share it with me, and I'll read it in a future episode to continue the conversation. Let's move on to our second question, which comes from former guest Joel L., who has been keeping up with the current Disney Plus shows, which raised this query. He writes, "In watching Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and rewatching Civil War, I'm confused about something. Bucky runs awfully fast, outrunning cars in that chase scene with Cap and the Black Panther, and he holds his own in the show against Walker after he's had the Super Soldier Serum. The end of Civil War shows that there was a Winter Soldier program, and obviously Hydra wanted super soldiers, but I really think if they'd been successful at making the serum, they'd have used it in considerably worse ways than a single secret weaponized man. So my question is Bucky a super soldier?" For this question, we're talking about the MCU version of Bucky, and the short answer is yes. But let's go into a little more detail than that, as a lot of this is kind of told in in-between scenes and with quick dialogue that can be easily missed if you're not paying close enough attention. As Joel points out, we learn in Captain America Civil War that there was more than one Winter Soldier, although Bucky was the only one until at least 1992, as Bucky took what was apparently the only existing serum from Howard Stark's car on December 16th, 1991, on the same day he killed Tony's parents. Now, where did Howard get that serum? Well, probably from the same source that Bucky originally got his serum from, Arnim Zola. When Bucky and his unit were captured in World War II, Zola used Bucky as one of a few guinea pigs to try to replicate the super soldier serum. While Buck didn't show any immediate signs of the serum working, it turns out it did, and that's what allowed him to survive plummeting from the train later in the war, although he did lose his arm as a result of the fall. By the time Bucky was reprogrammed to become the Winter Soldier, Zola was now in America working with S.H.I.E.L.D., while also working to let Hydra into the organization. Zola himself could have been the leak that allowed the Russian arm of Hydra to find out about the serum and send Bucky on his mission to retrieve it. From what we've seen in the movies and the shows, the super soldier serum is very difficult to create, with just a handful of people able to replicate Erskine's work. And even if they do, apparently it's not easy to mass manufacture, as there have been fewer than 20 super soldiers in the over 80-year history from Erskine's first experiments with Johann Schmidt sometime before 1943 up to the present day of the MCU, which is currently 2023. In chronological order, that would be Red Skull, Steve Rogers, Bucky, Isaiah Bradley, the 5 other Winter Soldiers, the 8 Flag Smashers, and now John Walker. I'm not counting the Hulk or Abomination, as their experiments went awry, nor am I counting the Centipede soldiers from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., as I discussed in the WandaVision episodes. I don't believe that show is MCU canon anymore. On a side note, in the comic books, Bucky is not a super soldier, and is simply a very skilled fighter who also has a cybernetic arm. The Marvel Comics have actually been even less successful at recreating the super soldier serum than what we've seen in the MCU. There are other man-made methods of creating superhumans, but most of them are either very risky or have some sort of mental cost involved that makes it not worth the price for all but the most desperate, which is why no country has an army full of super soldiers or similarly powered people. Like the first question, some of the answer here is supposition on my part. I'd love to hear if other people have theories on how the various MCU super soldiers came to be. Feel free to email me any comments or questions you'd like answered in a future episode. You can send any and all of those via email to welcometogeektown, all spelled out, @gmail.com. Or you can go to the website, welcome to, the number 2 in this case, geektown.com, and click the Submit a Question link if you'd prefer to remain anonymous. Other contact options include facebook.com/welcometogeektown or Twitter @geektownpodcast. Also, if you'd like to support the show directly, come join the Patreon at patreon.com/welcometogeektown for just $1 per month to get access to full scripts of the shows, outtakes, and a monthly shoutout. You can also help the show grow by subscribing and giving a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts to join the Geektown City Council, which helps other people find the show, so we can all tell them, welcome to Geektown, population, us. Welcome to Geektown is written, narrated, edited, and produced by me, Kurt Onstead. Theme music is by Aaron Lovitz, logo art by Archie Santana. All other sound clips are the copyrighted material of their respective owners, and no infringement is intended, falling under fair use.